Good morning. Yes. Good morning, everyone, those who are here in the room and those who are online. On behalf of the European Union, the Swedish governments, the Swedish International Agriculture Network Initiative, SIANI, and the FAO Investment Center, I would like to welcome you to this event, which is entitled Food Systems for the 21st Century, how data-driven analysis and multi-stakeholder collaboration contribute to policy decision-making and investments. My name is Mohammed Mansouri. I'm the director for the FAO Investment Center, and I'm happy to be moderating this session this morning. We would like to discuss a set of ingredients that are critical to the development and implementation of sustainable agri-food systems policies and investments. We will discuss several interrelated issues, the important roles of rigorous and timely analysis, evidence, and use, and their use in policy and investment formulation and decision-making, the consultative processes with all stakeholders, including farmer organizations, private sector, civil society, and all government entities and development partners, the mechanisms that link analysis to decision-making processes, and finally, the political economy that underpins action. We have assembled this morning a diverse group of experts to speak about these different aspects in concrete applications. We would like to highlight the work of the European Union, the FAO Investment Center, and CIRAD in participatory food systems assessments and FAO's regional analysis for policy and investment decisions. We would also like to discuss innovative examples from Sweden on the use of data and analysis for improving food security and nutrition and making it available to consumers, practitioners, and decision makers efficiently and transparently. We would also like to bring diverse examples from Latin America, West Africa, and Europe, discussing UN Food System Summit pathway processes, the humanitarian development nexus, and the importance of political support and consensus transformation of food systems. To get us started, allow me to first introduce Mr. Dan Eriksson. He is a State Secretary to the Minister for Rural Affairs in Sweden and the chair of the Swedish FAO Committee to provide his opening remarks for today's session. Mr. Eriksson, over to you. Thank you.
And do you hear me? Yes, okay. I'm so impressed to see so many of you here already in this early morning. So very welcome here. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be with you here at CFS 51 and to be taking part in this topical and timely side event. We have an interesting program ahead of us, and I hope you will all walk away at the end of it with some fresh perspectives and ideas. This afternoon, the CFS policy recommendations on strengthening collection and use of FSN data and related analysis tools to improve decision-making in support of the progressive realization of the right to adequate food in the context of national food security. A long sentence, I can see. It will be discussed for adoption in the plenary. Sweden very much welcomes the policy recommendations, which we believe will have an added value to strengthen food and nutrition policies and informed investments. I want to take this opportunity to highly encourage the uptake and implementation of the policy recommendations. Well-informed, evidence-based policy formulation not only enables better results for food security and nutrition, it can also contribute to increased confidence and trust in decision-making. Data-driven analyses are key in this regard, and thus Sweden well acknowledge the importance of sound data collection and management. Later on in today's program, you will hear from the Swedish Board of Agriculture on some examples and good practices for how to compile and securely share data. Without going into the details already now, I want to particularly mention Agrifood, which is a company that has received public project funding aimed at enabling sharing of agricultural data and developing digital solutions. And we see great potential in this project and believe it will bring benefits to many actors, not least agricultural business. You will hear more about this later on. And before closing, I want to thank all the presenters and panelists for engaging in this side event, as well as our co-organizers, the European Commission, FAO Investment Center, and the Swedish International Agriculture Network Initiative, SIANI. And with that, I wish you all an interesting session.
Many thanks, Mr. Eriksson, for your opening remarks. I now pass the floor to Ms. Annette Schniegens. She is head of the UN section, Deputy Permanent Representative to FAO, Minister Counselor from the European Union, to provide her opening remarks for today's session. Ms. Schniegens, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Do you hear me well? So I will echo in many respects what Dan has just said. First of all, thank you so much for your interest in this session, for being here, as you rightly mentioned, at so early hours before coffee time. And thank in particular the FAO Investment Center, Swedish government, SIANI, for organizing this very timely event. I just would like to start by saying or raising the attention to the fact that there's no really fully agreed definition of what is data for food and nutrition security. So FSN data is widely used, but it's a very broad concept. And I think that there's still a lot to go to finally understand what we mean with this. This is one of the, for me, the entry points for discussions. What do we cover and what do we need to make effective policy decisions? It is clear that the complexity and the broadness of agri-food systems requires new ways of collecting, processing, making sense out of data, and using these data across sectors and across stakeholders much more effectively. And as we will hear later, this is far from trivial. Also, there's need to standardize data and enhance the interoperability of information systems. We see with many projects that they're doing a great job in creating data and providing results, but the sustainability, the long-term longevity of these data is something we need to look at much more detail. So I'm particularly happy that this topic of data use for policy decision-making and investments is at the heart of this week's CFS 51, and that the CFS will adopt the recommendations on strengthening the collection and use of SNN data. So in the session today, we'll hear about the outcomes of what I think is a very fruitful project that shows the potential of this data. And it did so by creating 50 country-specific profiles and assessments of agri-food systems. So this is just to exemplify what you can do with which kind of data. These country profiles identify the key challenges for the sustainability of agri-food systems. And this is the second large area we need to talk to, not just what kind of data do we need, but what are sustainability data. So this information, hopefully we'll hear more about this, will help to guide public and private investments. It's clear that here we come to an area where we need to look into data sharing, and to look into open data and access to this data. I hope that, I should maybe also mention that apart from the country profiles, there's a couple of regional syntheses. The regional dynamics of food systems in Latin America, Southern and Western Africa. So I hope that these examples that we'll hear about can help to create a greater awareness of the potential of data and other types of information as well to inform policies at regional, national, and global level. And of course, I'm now looking very much forward to interesting presentations and panel discussions. And I hope that this is not a one-off event, but actually will be a first step into more structured dialogue and I would say development of an FSN data community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schniegens, for your thoughts, and Mr. Eriksson for your opening remarks. Now we are going to have a succession of blocks of session. The next one is going to be about 3 presentations that various partners will make. It will be followed by a panel discussion where we will also provide space for 2 panelists to make their own comments and remarks, and finally a Q&A session. So we're moving now to the presentation block or mode, and I would like to introduce the 3 presenters or presentations from FAO, from SIANI, and from the Swedish Board of Agriculture. Allow me first to introduce Ms. Meeta Punjabi Mehta, my colleague from, she is Senior Food Systems Officer in the FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and she was formerly in the FAO Investment Center with us to discuss the experiences of FAO in carrying out national and regional analysis and linking evidence to policy and investment decision making. Meeta, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your... Good now? So yes, welcome to this session, and thank you for your interest in this topic. As the title suggests, and as we've been talking, the focus of this presentation is how to use data, analysis, evidence, along with multi-stakeholder collaborations and consultative processes for policies and investments for food systems transformation. So basically, in this presentation, we will focus on the work of the joint effort of FAO, EU, and CIRAD since 2018, and some activities, key activities that have been conducted on this topic. The work started with a research study titled Food Systems at Risk, which emphasizes the challenges threatening the sustainability of global food systems. Following that, with the understanding that we cannot change what we cannot measure and assess, a specific methodology was developed for assessing the performance of food systems. And as was mentioned by the earlier speakers, this methodology was then implemented in 50 countries. And the methodology focuses around the 4 food systems. Beatrice, we can move to the next slide. The 4 key system goals of food and nutrition security, inclusive economic growth, environment sustainability, along with territorial balance and equity. And as we see that these 4 goals also are the pathways serve as entry points for achieving several SDGs. So basically the methodology, there's a detailed document explaining the methodology, but in a very simple manner. It says that the drivers of the food system, which are in 6 categories, the drivers along with the production environment and the consumption environment together influence the actors in the core of the food system. The core of the food system is from production to consumption and waste. And it is this action of the actors in the core of the food system which then has an impact on the outcomes, the sustainability outcomes that we see across the dimensions. So that is the systemic perspective. It also has feedback loops, so it is looking at the system as a dynamic system and not a static system. So with this analytical approach, it was combined with data, evidence, literature, and consultative processes at the country level, including national governments, experts, and key food system stakeholders. And the result was in the form of identifying 4 key food system challenges which revolve around the 4 goals. And these challenges were then fleshed out very much in detail with evidence-based narratives, which looked at the root causes of these challenges and also the interlinkages among the elements of the system. So this fleshing out of the challenges helped to identify some potential levers. And these country documents, country profiles, the joint effort of FAO, EU, and CIRAD, they are all available online. They're published as shown in the link below. So just a very quick example, in the case of Sierra Leone, the key challenges were in the form of food and nutrition security, the value chains, the low development of value chains, the unsustainable land use practices, and they had a specific question on the sustainability of marine and aquatic food systems. So when we finished this 50 countries assessment, we had a very rich database summarizing the key questions from 50 countries. And when we started looking at the regional, grouping them as regions, we saw that very strong regional patterns emerged. And these are documented in 4 regional briefs, one for West Africa, Southern and Eastern Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And it gives a holistic overview of the food systems in the region. At the regional level, we built on the country work and then complemented it with the regional context and the regional data. So the regional reports have also identified some regional food system dynamics, and then in the form of narratives, we also zoomed into the trade-offs or the cost of continuing to do business as usual, which also gave some direction for transition pathways. So for example, in the case of Latin America, the key dynamics are the large-scale livestock systems which are emerging, which are displacing the small producers, the globalized supply chain for non-food crops, for example, soybean, they are restructuring the agriculture sector and also weakening the local food systems. The policies and investments biased towards medium and large producers, leading to increasing marginalization of small farmers, the declining importance of local markets as distributors of food to the population is having its impact in terms of access to healthy food. And finally, the agriculture frontiers, the way we are pushing them is leading the ecosystem to reach a point of no return. And then all of these dynamics are interlinked. They are not separate or in silos. Again, for example, in West Africa, the main dynamics that we saw were the very significant increase in food imports, the high population growth and urbanization, which need to reassess or resize the food system, the governance and management of fishery resources, so the sustainability of the marine fisheries and the sustainability of agropastoral systems. These were the key challenges in West Africa. So if we zoom into the story of increasing imports in West Africa, we see, first of all, starting with agroecological context, that 75% of the population is living in the coastal areas. The population has almost doubled. It has significantly urbanized. The taste and preferences of the people are changing. And this population dynamic, along with the existing production system, the way it exists with small subsistence farming. So with this situation, despite the fact that agriculture is a main sector of the economy, they are very significantly relying on imports, which is about 20 million tons in the region, and almost 50% of this was from Russia and Ukraine. So we see the impacts of such dynamics will lead to persistent food and nutrition security, also natural resource degradation, because the increase in production has been through extensification rather than intensification. And in the long run, if these continues, it will make the food system in the region vulnerable to global market shocks, and the deforestation can lead to human livestock conflicts, which we are already seeing, increasing marginalization of small farmers. So some guidance points for the transition pathway is in the form of small farmer-oriented sustainable production systems, competitive value chains so they can compete with imports, and also consumer education regarding nutrition of the local food. So basically, we saw that we have a very rich database from the countries, we have a very rich database from the regions, and now the point is, how do we use all of this knowledge and information to translate it to action? And that is where the very recent initiative of FAO, EU, and AgriNatura starting in 2023. It's called the Sustainable Agri-Food Systems Intelligence, and it is designed for food systems transformation at scale and changing trajectories through problem-solving approaches, transition pathways, strengthening cross-sector policies, and hence fostering alliances and new investments. And in my last slide, I just talk about how actually data and evidence has been used for transformation at the country level. Is the case of Sierra Leone, where this process has recently started. So that based on all the knowledge of food systems assessment, the pathways, the stakeholders in the country identified the 4 major themes that they wanted to focus on. And together with several sessions of consultations and collaborations, they identified the vision for food systems transformation. And this has kind of now culminated into the Feed Ceylon, which is food security being the major challenge. Feed Ceylon is now the flagship initiative of the new government. And also alongside the government is talking about food systems coordination hub to coordination across various sectors in the food system. And we are hoping that such pilots and examples will pave the way for food systems transformation. Over. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Many thanks, Mita, for your presentation. And I think what is interesting and important is that we could see the move from the analytics, the conversation, the multi-stakeholder dialogue to action. And that action involves strong coordination now in this at the level of the country, like in Sierra Leone, and involves identification of entry points for investments and for policy change. And I think this is really how we are getting, this analysis and food system approaches, agri-food system approaches to land in terms of action. Thank you again for those insights. We'll now show a brief video from the Swedish Board of Agriculture presenting the Sweden's experiences in this area of analysis and decision making. We have also with us Ms. Frida Spår. She is team leader, Swedish Board of Agriculture in presence online. She's present online and will be available for a Q&A session later on. Can we launch the video? Yes.
Data sharing initiative in Sweden. The Swedish agriculture has long been generating large amounts of data at the farm level. However, this data is often trapped in isolated systems, data silos, which creates a lock-in effect. And despite large amounts of collected data, much data remains underutilized. And data sharing through integrations is costly and challenging due to the lack of standards within agriculture. Sharing data can be legally complex and take long time. There is a substantial amount of manual work involved for individual farmers, and farmers often lack a comprehensive overview due to the fragmented nature of data. Strategic initiatives are needed to simplify and enhance the everyday lives of farmers, making decisions easier and better in order to optimize the resources and make the administrative burden smaller. During the year 2020, the government gave the Swedish Board of Agriculture a task to carry out a study on how a national data space should look like. We, the Swedish Board of Agriculture, did that during that year together with the Research Institute, consultants and the federations of Swedish farmers. The study resulted in several recommendations to support the establishment of a national platform for data sharing with co-funding from the CAP. The building of the CAP should be developed by the sector close to the needs. Should make it easy to share the data, be done with transparency, be a neutral data space, and of course, compliant and safe. A company was started as well as a project, co-funded by the cooperation measure. The project shall build a national platform for sharing agriculture data. It should benefit the farmers in several ways, and in the long run, different actors close to the farmers within the whole sector. The project is carried out in a strong cooperation with several different types of actors. The company's aim is to simplify the data life for individual farmers, as well as help new digital tools to innovate on the platform. They are building the infrastructure and examples on how to share and refine in order to be used for example, better decision making. Well, and how is it constructed? The data is collected at the farm level. And this can include machine data, data from sensors and cameras. The farmer chooses which sources the platform should gather data from. The Agronode platform becomes the farmer's digital farm. It's where all the complexity is managed: legal matters, security, data quality. And the farmers who should have access to the data and for what purpose. And from the platform, they can choose to share the data further, for example, to facilitate applications, and hopefully in the future, even interactions with authorities and certification bodies. And to showcase what is possible, they have developed Agrosphere, which is a tool for automatic climate measurement and reporting at the farm level. And there is an increase in demand for climate data from the agricultural sector. And Agronode aim to measure and report on leads to reduce climate impact. They rely on verified models, but also emphasize on real data, less generalization, and more detailed information. And this climate calculation shows a good example on how to benefit from sharing data. We believe that the platform, which still is under construction, is a strategic initiative that will strengthen the Swedish agriculture in many ways. Initially, the farmers are in focus, and it will develop and include the other actors in the value chain. Hopefully, we as an authority can also in the future contribute more, not only with co-funding, but also with valuable data and use the data from the farmers. To do that, we need to work with, for example, both standardization and interoperability to share and use more data. We as an authority can also contribute to increase trust and willingness to share data and to use it and reuse it, which of course will give even more opportunities for better decision making and innovation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is an incredibly interesting example of how, we move from fragmentation and, basically the data in the hands of the farmers that are still managing it in manual ways towards consolidating it, making sense out of it, and then sharing it in ways that are more strategic for decision making and building trust. I think that is a key word there. Let me now give the floor to Ms. Vivian Ribeiro. She is Senior Data Scientist at the Stockholm Environment Institute. Ms. Ribeiro, you have the floor. Thank you.
I believe you can hear me well. So thank you very much for being here today. I really want to talk a little bit more on data democratization, because since yesterday, I've been hearing quite a lot on the importance of not only making data transparent, but also making data accessible. And I really want to, until the end of this presentation, make it very clear that this is not the same thing. And also how to engage people in different parts of this data production, data elaboration, and data distribution can be quite tricky. So I'm here to share 3 lessons that we learned in an initiative in Brazil. So next slide. So the principles of data democratization, they are not set in stone. You can see different principles, different ways of defining this, However, they all converge to the same aspect that you need to be transparent, you need to build that in a collaborative way, you need to build capacity to have the data literacy or people that can understand what we're trying to communicate. You need to make this accessible, and this goes from technology to go on the field if needed to really be able to understand what kind of product you need to distribute. And efficiency is key because, again, since yesterday, the most amazing discussion I could see was about the importance of $1. So $1 before used to make a whole lot different things that we can make nowadays. So being efficient is more important than ever. Next one. So do Pasto ao Prato, which stands in its Portuguese from pasture to plate, is this app that we built from an initiative called Trace, which gives transparency to commodity supply chains around the world, especially those associated to 70% of the deforestation in tropical environments. This one is designed in Brazil for Brazil domestic market. The idea there is that we give to consumers, and the most interesting lesson learned is actually we found out that not only consumers are using, is the possibility to understand the impacts, social and environmental impacts associated to the meat production in the country, make their informed decisions, but when they are doing that, they are also connecting slaughterhouses and retailers, closing the last node or the last link between two nodes of the supply chain. So we give to consumers the impact. We inform them about the farms that are direct suppliers or indirect suppliers. We tell them how much deforestation, fire, slavery, and also how many sanitary fines a slaughterhouse paid because of sanitary issues. And what they give back to us in a crowdsourcing effort is the connection between this slaughterhouse and the retailers. Next one. So the 3 lessons learned that I really want to share today is the data pipeline matters. It's not really about what kind of tool you're using, but about how you're connecting them. So very often we have small teams that are trying to make the most of the environment of the money that we have, and how you're going to distribute this data is extremely important. You cannot afford doing different data tools that will not connect to each other, and suddenly you have a Frankenstein and a monster that you cannot keep. So very lean products, data products are extremely important to be considered sustainable. The second, next slide, is probably my favorite, which is data accessibility, and I have a very interesting story to tell you. So the first version of this app had this very scientific approach of giving consumers the possibility for them to see a rank in different aspects, environmental, social, sanitary, how bad was the conditions for the animals before slaughtering, and we put that in a rank. And it took around 7 to 8 minutes for anybody to understand what we were trying to communicate. And when we were discussing the first version of the app with one of the biggest retailers in Brazil, I mean, we got a very good laugh at the beginning, but the thing was, consumers may take from 12 to 15 seconds to make a decision of what they're going to purchase. So how am I going to ask them to spend 8 minutes just to understand the data that I want them to understand? And that's how the collaborative part of constructing this app started, where we converted everything to emojis, but of course, giving possibilities for those interested to know more to access more information during the moment that they're selecting their product or later at home. The next one, it's the value of social media that needs to be considered if you're trying to communicate beyond the stakeholders. So very often in data products, we do not put users as stakeholders. In this case, stakeholders would be the farmers, the slaughterhouse companies, the retailing companies. But if you think from the perspective of the users, you need to engage in a more accessible language. You need to tell them your whole PhD built lessons learned to a more communicatable, more clear language that they can understand and engage. And this is how we made from fitness influencers to nutritionists, but also vegetarians. So the app actually scanned the beef, but most of our users are vegetarians. And they are there doing this scan in their supermarkets because they are interested to raise transparency in the supply chain. Next one. So the challenges and opportunities are very visible, especially when you start to engage with more multi-stakeholder participation. But I tried to represent here in a Venn diagram what I think it would be a very interesting starting point for any data product. You need to engage stakeholders, of course, but you need to be transparent with a very lean development to make sure that you are sustainable and to make sure that you can dedicate the time and also suppliers or investments you have to do what matters the most, which is to fulfill the goal of raising transparency in this case. So give scientists time for doing science and give developers space and a very lean product pipeline for this to flow easily and then to grow in their goals. Cultural barriers, and I wanted to make this bold in this slide because we went through a more extreme phase of, not extreme, but kind of like very polarized moment in Brazil very recently. And we faced a lot of reactions when using this app and talk to this app in social media. And social media is the place where you're gonna find a lot of cultural challenges, but also polarization. So navigating these things gonna be probably the most challenging things when facing more polarized moments in the history, but it's worth it to engage with users because this is when you learn and when you put the information to the service of society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ribeiro, and this is really very interesting. And working in the investment center, I retained the last line of your second slide, which is efficiency, low costs, low transactions, and we would like really to follow up with conversations because we have a group working on digitalization, and we're very interested in what is empowering digitalization for the consumers, for the small-scale farmers, for the people. Many thanks for that. Let me now move on to our panelists. And our distinguished panelists are three today. We have Ms. Maria Fernanda Medeiros. She is the Director of Agrifood Systems Research Center at the Universidad de los Andes, Colombia. Mr. Abdullahi Mohammadou, he is the Executive Secretary of the Permanent Interstate Committee for Drought Control in the Sahel, known as SILS, a regional organization based in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And the SILS is the technical arm of ECOWAS in West Africa for all what is related to drought resilience. And Mr. Nick Jacobs, he is specialist in agri-food, trade and development policy at the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, IPES Food. He is based in Brussels, Belgium. To Ms. Maria Fernanda Medeiros, I would like to ask you, Maria Fernanda, given your active role and involvement in the analytical work for Colombia's agri-food systems assessments in the context of the UN Food System Summit process, could you kindly share your views on the use of data in science policy dialogues, especially with respect to the formulation of future policy and investment interventions that strengthen the sustainability of agri-food systems? Puede hablar en español o en inglés, como quiera.
Muchas gracias por la invitación. Voy a empezar un poco discutiendo el tema de los esfuerzos que implica la transformación de los sistemas alimentarios en Latinoamérica, particularmente porque en este contexto es muy importante la convergencia que existe entre los datos, la ciencia y los diálogos políticos para desempeñar un papel fundamental en entender estos sistemas agroalimentarios y además de alguna manera han permitido desarrollar programas específicos e iniciativas regionales que han sido exitosas en Colombia. Las iniciativas que existen básicamente en el momento han permitido entender a detalle los sistemas agroalimentarios que existen en el país y han permitido identificar algunos puntos críticos sobre los cuales el gobierno, tanto nacional como regional, ha venido trabajando junto con los diferentes actores, incluyendo centros de investigación y universidades. Estas iniciativas permiten de alguna manera empezar a observar influencias en temas de política que garantizan seguridad alimentaria, temas de reducción del impacto ambiental, la pobreza, la inseguridad alimentaria y han promovido el desarrollo sostenible, inclusivo y equitativo a nivel regional. Hay dos ejemplos que quisiera resaltar en Colombia. Uno de ellos es Plaza Colombia. Plaza Colombia es una plataforma y es una iniciativa que permite consolidar datos e información en temas de abastecimiento, de cambio climático y de nutrición. Y es una iniciativa muy interesante porque ha permitido la integración de diferentes actores, incluyendo centros de investigación, el gobierno nacional, los gobiernos departamentales y las diferentes universidades. Otra iniciativa interesante es el sistema de abastecimiento en Antioquia, que ha venido siendo impulsado por FAO. Este sistema de abastecimiento tiene información alrededor de las cadenas que permiten un mejor funcionamiento y un mejor sistema del comercio dentro de la región. Esto permite que los pequeños agricultores puedan intercambiar sus productos y comercializar a nivel local y a nivel internacional de forma muy ágil a través de un modelo de agrologística colaborativo, fomentando de esta manera el desarrollo territorial inclusivo, la equidad y el desarrollo de la inclusión en la región. Estos esfuerzos, como podemos ver, son esfuerzos que se desarrollan a escala subnacional, a escala regional, y existe una clara necesidad de soluciones que puedan articularlos y puedan demostrar la eficiencia de los datos en temas de políticas públicas a nivel nacional. En este sentido, el Centro de Investigación en Sistemas Agroalimentarios de la Universidad de los Andes ha desarrollado metodologías que permiten mezclar tanto datos cuantitativos como datos cualitativos y análisis de coherencia de políticas para poder entender cuál es la situación que tenemos en el país. Hasta ahora, los resultados iniciales nos han permitido tener un panorama general de los sistemas alimentarios y poder tener esa conexión entre las diferentes políticas en temas de seguridad alimentaria, nutrición, sostenibilidad de los ecosistemas, el cambio climático y la inclusión social. Nuestro interés es democratizar esta información a través de lo que hemos llamado la Plataforma de Observatorio de Sistemas Agroalimentarios en Colombia, y queremos garantizar de esta manera que exista un seguimiento y un monitoreo de esa transición que requiere en estos momentos el país. Sin embargo, creo que todavía tenemos varios retos que voy a mencionar solo algunos de ellos. El primero es definir claramente ciertos indicadores para poder hacer una toma de decisiones activas en el contexto de los sistemas alimentarios. Los indicadores actuales son una medida todavía indirecta de la situación que tiene el país y es necesario en este contexto que la academia se vincule para desarrollar estas discusiones y poder desarrollar estos indicadores. Se requiere todavía establecer una sinergia efectiva entre lo que es la política nacional y los intereses locales. Todavía vemos varias diferencias entre los dos aspectos y es necesario trabajar en poder alinear estas prioridades. La colaboración entre la ciencia, los diálogos políticos y los datos realmente es importante, pero es esencial también realizar inversión en temas de infraestructura para poder recopilar, analizar y difundir estos datos en temas alimentarios. Y algo muy importante es que necesitamos todavía una participación activa de los diferentes actores que permita llevar estas discusiones en estas definiciones y nuevos conceptos que se requieren para poder lograr una transformación. Es importante los análisis de las tendencias en el concepto de los sistemas alimentarios y aquí es importante que el gobierno nacional y el gobierno regional tengan una participación mucho más activa y por supuesto creo que hay un rol fundamental de la academia en poder canalizar los esfuerzos que se están desarrollando en este momento en Colombia para poder tener un panorama de la situación que ocurre a nivel nacional y poder articular estas iniciativas regionales. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, María Fernanda, for your presentation and for your intervention. I think Colombia is really one of those countries where we see that the work on food systems is being deepened in and anchored in the realities of the country. First, that it is being decentralized or territorialized, and I think this is very important because countries tend to have multiple food systems. Actually, the territories and the people don't feed themselves the same way, don't produce the same way, and the role of science also to help come up with indicators to monitor progress on all those fronts. And thanks also for referring to the entry points in terms of policy, whether it is trade, whether it is decentralization, whether it is also, the specific role that smallholder farmers can play in the space that they should have there. Thank you. Let me now move to our second distinguished panelist, Dr. Abdoulaye Mohamedou. Depuis 50 ans, le CIL soutient ses États membres dans la collecte et l'analyse des données pour prévenir les crises alimentaires et nutritionnelles, mais aussi pour les gérer quand elles apparaissent. Ceci dit, nous constatons que le Sahel et l'Afrique de l'Ouest, plus largement, font face à des chocs plus fréquents, plus aigus, de nature différente, qu'ils soient climatiques ou sécuritaires, etc. Pouvez-vous partager avec nous votre expérience dans l'utilisation des analyses et des processus multi-acteurs du CILS dans les prises de décision de politique et d'investissement? Et bien sûr, si vous pouvez également nous parler de l'action que vous menez dans le nexus entre l'humanitaire, le développement et la paix, et les actions qui adressent les facteurs structurels qui sous-tendent des vulnérabilités des systèmes agroalimentaires dans la région. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le modérateur. Je voudrais à mon tour remercier le Centre d'investissement de la FAO, l'Union européenne et le gouvernement suédois de l'opportunité offerte au CILS pour parler de son expérience de production des données pour l'aide à la décision et du dialogue autour de la prise de décision avec ses partenaires. Je voudrais d'abord rappeler que le CILS a été créé en 1973, donc il a 50 ans, dans la foulée des sécheresses des années 70 qui ont frappé le Sahel. Et depuis lors, son mandat, c'était de s'investir dans la recherche de la sécurité alimentaire et la lutte contre les effets de la désertification et la dégradation des sols. C'est essentiellement produire des données pour prévenir les sécheresses et l'insécurité alimentaire au Sahel et en Afrique de l'Ouest. Comme il l'a rappelé, il a 3 sites, le siège qui est à Ouagadougou, au Burkina Faso, mais également 2 institutions spécialisées, l'IN à Niamey, dédiée justement à la production de l'information et à la formation, et l'IN basée à Bamako, au Mali, qui est dédiée, elle, à la recherche. Donc, le CILS a mis en place un certain nombre de dispositifs pour la production des données. C'est d'abord ce que nous appelons le dispositif de prévention et de gestion des crises alimentaires. C'est un dispositif unique en Afrique qui concerne à la fois les 13 membres du CILS, mais également l'ensemble des pays de la CEDEAO. Parce que comme il l'a rappelé, le CILS est également le bras technique de la CEDEAO et de l'UEMOA. Donc, ce dispositif se réunit 4 fois par an et donne 4 avis dans l'année. Il est basé sur un partenariat entre les experts du CILS, les experts des pays, mais également les experts des partenaires, notamment la FAO, le PAM, FUSNET et d'autres institutions impliquées dans la production des données. Donc, ce dispositif permet la production des données à la fois sur l'agriculture, l'élevage, l'hydrologie, la nutrition, la santé, le genre, au niveau de l'ensemble de la région. Et à ce dispositif est adossé un outil que nous appelons le cadre harmonisé. Le cadre harmonisé, c'est cet outil qui permet de collecter les données sur la vulnérabilité et de dire au pays, voilà, pour l'année à venir, les risques d'insécurité alimentaire dans chacune des régions, dans chacun des pays de la région. Ce cadre a cette particularité qu'il a été mis en place justement pour obtenir un consensus avec l'ensemble des partenaires sur la région, que ce soit la FAO, le PAM, FUSNOET ou d'autres organisations comme Oxfam, le CICR, pour que au moins il y ait une seule source de données qui fait consensus à travers les différentes institutions. Une fois obtenues ces données, qu'est-ce qu'on en fait? La première destination des données, ce sont les gouvernements. Et les gouvernements, ça les aide d'abord à élaborer ce qu'ils appellent les plans de réponse pays face aux risques d'insécurité alimentaire, aux risques de sécheresse, aux risques d'inondation, etc. Nous produisons également des données sur les marchés. Ces données sur les marchés s'adressent également aux organisations de producteurs ou producteurs individuels qui leur permettent de savoir quelle est la situation des marchés au niveau de la région, mais également au pays. Je vais donner un exemple. Il y a à peine 2 semaines, le directeur général du commerce extérieur en Côte d'Ivoire m'a appelé et me dit « Ah, le gouvernement est en réunion, le Premier ministre tient une réunion actuellement et il veut savoir les prix du riz sur les marchés de la région Sahel et Afrique de l'Ouest. Est-ce que vous avez ces données ?» Voilà les types de demandes auxquelles nous faisons face, qui sont ponctuelles. Un autre exemple pour étayer aussi ce fonctionnement, c'est un président de la région à qui j'avais envoyé les résultats des prévisions climatiques, parce que nous faisons également les services climatiques. Et quand je lui ai envoyé le rapport, alors qu'il a été publié deux jours auparavant par le SILS, il m'a dit « Mais pourquoi vous ne m'avez pas envoyé ce rapport le premier jour de son élaboration ?» Parce que pour nous, la situation pluviale dans la région est l'information la plus importante dont nous disposons aujourd'hui pour prendre des décisions. Alors, ces dispositifs, donc, projet, cadre harmonisé, permettent de produire l'information, permettent aux pays de faire leur plan de réponse. Nous avons également un autre dispositif qui réunit cette fois-ci la région et ses partenaires extérieurs, c'est le réseau de prévention de crise alimentaire, qui se réunit 2 fois par an, en décembre en Afrique et en avril à Paris, au siège de l'OCDE qui accueille le club du Sahel et de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Là, c'est une réunion qui permet de mobiliser aux besoins les partenaires de la région pour dire, voilà, la région, pour l'année, je vais donner un exemple, hein, en 22-23 par exemple, on avait environ 40 millions de personnes qui étaient en instance d'attente d'une aide alimentaire, qui est répartie évidemment, on parlait tout à l'heure du profil de chaque pays, qui est évidemment réparti selon, on dira par exemple le Nigeria à 15 millions, le Niger à 3 millions, le Burkina 1 million, le Mali 1 million, pour mobiliser les partenaires de la région, notamment l'Union européenne. En fonction des enjeux, nous essayons de mobiliser au plus haut niveau. En 2022, il y avait 2 commissaires de l'Union européenne qui étaient mobilisés, un président de la région qui assurait la tutelle du comité de haut niveau sur la sécurité alimentaire. C'est un autre dispositif qui est géré par l'UEMOA. Donc, voilà les dispositifs. Quels sont les enjeux pour nous? Donc, pour le futur, pour les années à venir. Parmi les réflexions, il y a eu évidemment la question du nexus. Et comment peut-on sortir de ce paradigme de toujours annoncer voilà, le nombre de populations qui sont en attente d'insécurité alimentaire, voilà, nous mobilisons les populations. Alors, à la réflexion, il a été conclu que sur l'Afrique, en tout cas sur cette région Sahel, Afrique de l'Ouest, l'action publique, il y a trois champs couverts par l'action publique. Le champ humanitaire, le champ du développement et le champ de la paix et de la sécurité. Et souvent, ce sont les mêmes acteurs qui sont concernés, ce sont les mêmes zones même. Notre expérience d'ici, c'est que les zones les plus affectées, par exemple, par l'insécurité alimentaire, sont les zones qui sont également affectés par l'insécurité civile. Donc, pratiquement, ce sont les 3 modes d'action qui sont pratiqués. Et nous nous sommes engagés sur la mise en œuvre de ces nexus à travers un alignement sur les pays. Que font les pays aujourd'hui dans le domaine du nexus humanitaire, paix et développement? Je crois que si j'avais le temps, j'aurais pu faire le point sur ce que nous sommes en train de faire. Mais un autre enjeu pour nous, c'est que jusqu'à présent, nous nous sommes essentiellement concentrés sur la prévention. Ces données sur la longue durée, moi c'est mon avis, je suis chercheur en sciences sociales, comment alors les questionner, les utiliser pour des véritables politiques de développement? Parce que c'est en plus les mêmes pays, les mêmes zones, et je me dis, mais on peut avoir quand même un profil sur 30 ans, 20 ans, 30 ans de ces régions-là. Et quelles seraient les politiques les plus appropriées pour le faire? C'est aussi, l'autre enjeu, c'est aussi des services de proximité. Comment rendre accessibles les données aux petits producteurs qui en ont besoin, sachant très bien qu'on assiste aujourd'hui à une transformation des systèmes alimentaires avec de plus en plus de jeunes, de femmes comme entrepreneurs. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Abdoulaye, and many thanks for your intervention. I think, SILS plays a key role in the regional integration in West Africa, providing data, but also harmonizing that data to make it, ready for action. By country, by region, the various sets of data, and it plays that very critical role in terms of policy advice, policy making in the region. I think we tend maybe to forget, but West Africa is quite highly integrated region, actually, with ECOWAS, with SILS, with a number of regional organizations that, are doing their best really to move the agenda forward and on the 3 dimensions of peace, humanitarian, and developments, and SILS is one of those, integration modalities in the region. Thank you again, and let me move now to Nick Jacobs. Nick, Agrifood has been a leader in producing evidence and advocating for changes in the trajectory of our agri-food systems, modifying policies and guiding investment to enhance economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Can you let us know about your insights on the political building blocks in driving the sustainable transformation of the agri-food systems? Specifically, could you share insights on how IPES contributes to building political support and consensus to advance sustainable food systems or agri-food systems, and what challenges and opportunities you've encountered in this endeavor? Thank you.
Thanks very much. As already hinted by the chair, I'll be talking about different types of data and evidence, and certainly the work that we do is really zooming out and providing an analysis of the policy challenges at a global level in moving towards sustainable food systems. So the organization I work for, IPES Food, stands for the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems. This is a panel that brings together 24 experts from different scientific disciplines and also representing different types of knowledge. So from the hard sciences and academics through to practitioners, farmers, people from civil society. And I think we see our role essentially as being a science policy interface. So a role, I think, similar to the high-level panel of experts of the CFS, and a role in which we really try to take the vast amounts of scientific evidence that's out there and turn it into something usable for policymakers. And a key part of that is recognizing the scientific uncertainties and recognizing data gaps. But it's also about saying where we do know enough to act when we're looking at the whole system and looking at the urgency of the challenges we face. And indeed, whether we're talking about shifting our systems to a different agroecological paradigm, whether we're talking about the health aspects of food systems or any other aspect, what we try to do in our analysis is really to organize the vast amounts of evidence out there in a way that can tell a clear story about how we got there, who got us here, what policies, what actors, what interests, and how we can move forward, knowing what we know about the challenges on the ground, but also those challenges in terms of power and governance. So what does that look like concretely in our work? There are really three components of how we produce our analysis that reflect our understanding of what's needed for informed decision-making on food systems. First of all, we take a food system approach that looks really along the whole chain and looking at who shapes decisions across the food system. So, instead of producing an analysis where we look at production, supply chain, retail, instead of dividing up the analysis that way, we'll try to identify kind of cross-cutting trends through the food system. And in one of our key pieces of analysis, we looked at the lock-ins, which are keeping us locked into an industrial food system and preventing a shift towards an agroecological system. And in doing this, we really tried to identify trends all through the food system, including the narratives that keep us focused on feeding the world and producing food a certain way, also looking at decision-making itself and the short-termism that limits the types of policies we can adopt. So this is a type of analysis that really tries to tell a clear story about what change is needed and what is holding it back, and with power at the center of that analysis. It's also a type of analysis that's really built on integrating different types of knowledge. And I mentioned already that within our panel, we have a mix of different knowledge types that are represented. And our concern is that in some processes, in some global processes, it has been very challenging to have different types of knowledge represented on equal footing. And in conducting our analysis, we certainly do not limit ourselves to peer-reviewed academic journals, which of course are a key source of knowledge, but there are many other insights and many other perspectives in food systems that we consider essential. So we'll try to have a very broad range of perspectives represented in that work, and to conduct dialogues alongside a kind of classic literature review. And finally, the vision is really developed with food system actors. And we, through our work, in particularly work we've done in Europe and in West Africa, we've held extensive processes to co-develop a vision with food system actors. And this is not just based on consulting people based on a set of predefined questions, but really having open-ended discussions with food system actors to understand their perspectives and allow that to influence the framing of the questions we're asking. And one good example of that was work we did with European partners between 2016 and 2019 to co-develop a vision for a common food policy for Europe. And we did this through a number of policy labs in Brussels and in cities around Europe, which had been developing cross-cutting sustainable food policies. And that was a process involving more than 400 people over 3 years to develop a vision that at the end we could provide to policymakers and say, this is not just the view of a single organization, but this really captures a broader consensus and therefore carries a bit more legitimacy. So that's an overview of the type of analysis we provide that we think is essential to really help policymakers to make sense of the vast amounts of evidence and data out there and to guide these big policy visions that we need alongside the sharing and generating of data on the ground to transform our food systems. And of course, there are several challenges in doing this, and I won't elaborate much because I think that might also be an interesting topic for Q&A. But certainly, in doing this work, we as an organization have a clear worldview that's reflected in the way we will frame a discussion. And in doing that, we will certainly try to bring a lot of actors around the table, but we're aware that starting with that clear sense of what needs to change and with a clear vision that the political economy needs to change and the power relations need to change. That's a starting point that does make it difficult for all actors to get around the table. And so what we do is certainly not purporting to be a multi-stakeholder process or to have everyone around the table, but it does try to bring a large number of actors to come with a clear, broad-based vision for food system change that we hope is then useful for policymakers to guide their actions. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks, Nick, for your insights. I think, the political economy, you said it at the end, the power differentials in the agri-food systems and the types of conversations you manage to have with all those actors in order to come up with a common vision. I think, what we also see in our work is that the consumer side sometimes stays in a blind spot while they actually do shape the whole demand with their, cultural views, anthropological views, and so on. And I think that also is very important. I think we have heard now from our distinguished panelists, and thank you for all your insights. I checked with the organization and we can go a bit beyond the time that is allocated because the room is not used after this session. So we can go maybe 10 or 15 minutes more just to be able to have a decent Q&A session and not only people speaking from the podium. But let me start because we were talking about democratization and so on, and I think that our colleague Frida Spår, who is the team leader, Swedish Board of Agriculture, didn't have the opportunity to speak. So I would like to ask her a question here that came, I think, from the online participants. The presentation from the Swedish Board of Agriculture spoke of the AgroNode platform, which sounds very promising. It would be interesting to know when the platform will be fully operational and if there are plans for AgroNode to develop further solutions for sharing and refining agricultural data. Frida, if you are with us.
Yes, I am. Many thanks for the question. We believe that by the end of 2006, that it will be up and running by itself without co-funding from public funding. And they are now looking at the pig sector in Sweden and may have made some interesting findings, which they will further elaborate on and hopefully innovate on. And they also would like to further analyze data from our authority and how they can and how we can share and use and reuse our data as well, since we have many high value sets, of course. Thank you.
This was very concise response. Now, I'm opening the floor to, any questions from the participants in the room. Please just raise your hands. If you have a question, you can present yourself very quickly and be quite concise. And if it is directed to someone on the podium, please indicate it. Very quiet. No question, please. Yes, you have the mic in front of you. Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Katarina Eriksson. I represent Tetra Pak. I was curious to know a bit more about the West African initiative. It was mentioned that this platform and data collection was also intended to provide data to producers, but is it also collecting data from producers and private sector? It hasn't been mentioned anything about private sector, which also has, of course, a lot of data that they could potentially share. Maybe this is done already, but it would be interesting to hear a bit more about that.
Thank you very much. We can take 2 or 3 questions and then, yes, please.
Good morning, and thank you for very nice presentations. My name is Henrik Brundin with Swedbio at Stockholm Resilience Center. My question goes to the colleague from IPBES Food. I would like to know if you have, maybe you mentioned, in that case I missed, if you have done the policy and stakeholder engagement dialogues also for and within Africa, and if you can say something about if that outcome of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are 2 questions there. Inna, I think you raised your hand, and the gentleman on your, yes.
Good morning. My name is Ina Punda, FAO Investment Center. I have a question to a colleague from Brazil on Project do Pasto a Prato, which is somewhat related to a person from Tetra Pak. I was interested to know what was the role of the industry association in data collection, if there was any, and how the control of actually emoji assigned to different products is done, if it's, what was the arrangement to ensure the data quality? Thank you.
Good morning, Paul Kiernan. I'm at the ESF division here in FAO. I just had a question to pretty much any of the panelists in relation to understanding better the issue of trade-offs and how data is affecting, influencing, making that conversation around compromise any easier in terms of understanding what that trade-off is, who has to make the compromise, and how that multi-stakeholder piece is benefiting from data. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe we can have the first, I see Nuno who is being impatient. Go ahead. So and which will be the last question that we will take, please.
Yes, also to Mrs. Ribeiro, Nuno Santos from FAO. Also to Mr. Ribeiro on the topic of do pasto para o prato. Just to understand what do you think is the evolution in consumer behavior in Brazil? Because I've noticed in your slides there were only 2,000 users of the app, which for Brazil is quite small still. And I was wondering if this is something you see evolving, or if this is really just a niche of some people that are really interested in the topic of environmental impact.
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. So maybe there is a set of questions for Mr. Abdullahi Mohamedou, about the data that you are collecting in West Africa, if it also comes from the private sector, and also the multi-stakeholder conversations that you manage. Can you give us your insights about it?
Merci beaucoup. Merci pour la question. Alors, sur la collecte de données auprès du privé, je voudrais dire d'abord que chez le privé, c'est d'abord les producteurs. Nous n'excluons pas, nous ne faisons pas la distinction entre producteurs et privés en général, c'est des privés aussi. Et l'essentiel de la production en Afrique, ce sont les exploitations paysannes, c'est des exploitations familiales. Donc, c'est déjà le privé. Mais nous collectons également des données au niveau, comme je l'ai dit, des marchés. C'est aussi chez les privés. Mais il faut savoir aussi que les organisations des producteurs, mais également certaines organisations du privé, produisent aussi des informations qui sont également confrontées avec les nôtres. Donc, voilà un peu la réponse que je voulais donner à cette question. Peut-être qu'il n'y a pas une collecte systématique au niveau du privé en tant que tel, le privé au sens, je pense, d'entreprise, des choses comme ça. Parce que l'orientation initiale de notre système de collecte des données, comme je l'avais dit, c'était vraiment pour prévenir les crises alimentaires et c'était pour aider les gouvernements. Je pense que vous avez raison de poser cette question qui va être également un enjeu pour nous dans la collecte des données. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Mohamedou. Je crois qu'il y avait également une question sur du collègue qui travaille sur la résilience, sur les mécanismes de consultation multi-acteurs et comment vous les gérez au niveau de la région.
Merci, excusez-moi pour avoir oublié. J'avais souligné tout à l'heure qu'il y avait ce cadre harmonisé qui est un outil consensuel au niveau de la région qui rassemble à la fois le SILS, les pays, mais également les partenaires importants sur la région comme la FAO, le PAM, FUSNet qui est un système américain, mais également les autres organisations en particulier qui sont dans l'humanitaire. Nous avons un comité de pilotage de ces mécanismes, mais ces mécanismes également se réunissent régulièrement, pratiquement chaque année après les réunions du projet, pour s'entendre sur la vie qu'on doit lancer à la fois pour les pays, mais également pour les partenaires techniques et financiers de la région. Je dois avouer que ces dispositifs sont bien mis en place avec beaucoup d'expérience dans le partenariat entre les différents acteurs, parce que c'est des processus qui datent des années 80 pour le PREJEC et les années 2000 pour le cadre harmonisé. Donc, sur ce plan-là, on n'a pas vraiment de difficultés. Et peut-être rappeler aussi que dans le cadre du PREJEC, qui permet la collecte des données au niveau des pays, là également, c'est un partenariat entre le SILS, les pays, mais également des partenaires qui soutiennent les pays individuellement. Donc, il y a tout un consensus autour de la production et de la diffusion des données au niveau de la région. C'est ce que je voulais dire. Merci.
Many thanks. I think there are two questions for Ms. Ribeiro. The first one is there any role for industry associations? Actually, it's also related to the first question to Mr. Mohamedou, which is, the industry associations, for example, along the value chains in the system you presented, which is actually from field to plate, right? In Brazilian or in Portuguese. And the second is about really the outreach of this app and what is the potential behind and how the consumer behavior is shaped in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. It happens to be actually the two most popular topics in the team, so I will try to not talk for the next 45 minutes. So the industry association is extremely important for us because we engage it since the beginning after phase 1. And I need to say, because it's such an important thing to go from MRV to a stable product, because we make a lot of sometimes wrong assumptions, sometimes shallow assumptions about the representation of industries. This goes from slaughterhouses to retailers. And one thing, for example, the retailer was how we reshaped things towards emoji, was listening to retailers, but also how we represented the indicators, and this goes directly to the discussion on the quality of the data, how we are representing their activities in a fair way. A very quick example I can give to you is in the sanitary inspection. So first, we created a rank based on it's worse if you have more fines and better if you don't have any. However, then we found out that those with more transparency is actually the ones that are getting more information, but also the biggest ones, they are the ones more frequently inspected. So we are now way more, I would say that we are way more complex on our methodology, but we can represent in a more fair way the operations of the industries, both retailers and slaughterhouses. The emoji was as oversimplification, of course. We have 5 emojis, so we cannot really kind of like do much more than that, otherwise we'll lose the users. However, when you go to more detailed informations, we are very fair representing why we assigned a specific emoji, which goes actually to the second question, which is an amazing one on how Brazil is particularly challenging for us in an app like that. I have friends and they are teachers in Sweden, and I'm always very shocked about the differences in sustainability education between Sweden and Brazil. So we have a barrier there on communication. That's why social media is so important. We have 7,700 downloads, and from 7,700 downloads, we could engage that. We could get 2,200 people that are really putting information on the app. This means that lots of people, they are downloading, but they are not using the app, which is something that we would expect. We talk with other apps like Waze, quite a popular one for people driving, and they actually have lower rates of conversion than we have. But this all goes to education. How can you convince the person to go there? So now what we have is very engaged consumers, but we need to overcome this barrier. We need to work on rewarding systems. It can be a gamification, but it can also be another source of contribution to education. If you scan 20, 30 products, what can you get from the app? Another thing that we currently do is invest on citizen science. Is to call people, researchers that are interested in the field, to collaborate with us, and then collaborating with the database, they are scientifically part of the product. So they are also authors of the data set. But the barrier in Brazil is really to understand why people would like and would love to join us in this mission of raising transparency. Social media, education, translations of our messages, and direct engagement proves so far to be the most powerful one.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I have a number of questions coming from the online participants. This one, I would simplify it a bit. It is directed to Mita. I don't have the name of the person who sent this question. So, Mita, based on your work and thinking about policy and investment for sustainable food systems, you have presented, a lot of, insights coming from these regional synthesis of agri-food systems. What do you know about the level at which we should intervene, and what would be the role of the regional organizations there, more particularly? Mita, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for that, sharing that question. So basically, as we've said, the work is at the national level, and also we've done work at the regional level, the regional level synthesis, but the actions will have to be at all levels. So different actions at different levels. At the regional level, dialogues and discussions and debates, because they're similar topics, right? If I take one topic on the marine ecosystem, sustainability of marine ecosystems, we cannot achieve that. All West African countries face similar issues, but we cannot achieve an impact unless it is a joint initiative, at least a consensus among all the countries to take action. And then, of course, at the national level, it is the policies and the investments. But most importantly, the actual changes will happen at the subnational level, because one will have to zoom in there. That's where the local actors are. So the action is at all levels, the discussion, debates at all levels. And if you allow me a moment, Mohammed, I can touch on the point of trade-offs, which was brought up. Yeah. So it's a very important question, and that was our thinking also behind doing all this synthesis work, is that we really have to show very strongly what are the trade-offs of continuing to do business as usual. Again, if we touch upon the fishery example, IUU is such a big thing, right? And it is leading to environment implications, biodiversity loss, the nutrition for the country itself, because it's licenses which are given to other countries. And so unless we show what the outcome is of business as usual, and that is the trade-off, if you continue to do what we are doing, that is going to be hopefully a very strong tool for bringing about the change in trajectories that is required. And it could be scenario building. Okay, one scenario is business as usual. here is the other scenario, which could be an alternative scenario which we can achieve if we change the trajectories. So we are hoping that would be a very powerful tool to bring about the changes, but it's a very initial stage and we have not got to that level of sharing those findings.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mita. And actually transitioning on the trade-offs, there was also the question, who is making those trade-offs? I mean, who is taking the decision over those trade-offs? And this is why I'm now moving to Nick, asking him to follow up on this question, but also one other, one which is even hotter. Politics, corruption, this is from Mesfin Feleki. Online. Politics and corruption are dominating here. Now, how can we break this stuff? I'm just reading through. To make food production and supply sustainable, data are also highly politicized. How can we resolve this? So this is about more the political economy and the power games in the system, whether you have some contribution there. But I think the question also about trade-offs and who is making them and how you mediate, between those, two different positions, so many different positions is key. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's a common point in addressing both of those questions, and it's about governance. And we, in all of our work, we put a big emphasis on governance, and particularly on the need to adopt food policies, cross-cutting, integrated food policies. And we emphasize this not only because the challenges in food systems are cross-cutting, but also because shifting towards a different governance of food systems is a way to address the political economy that's so broken, and the amount of capture of governance that we see in our current systems, whether it's agricultural ministries and agricultural big ag lobbies that have a real control over those agricultural policies, whether it's other sectoral policies like trade that can be really captured by specific interests. So we see this as a huge leverage point for countries to be able to adopt food policies. And we've seen this already at European level with the adoption of a farm to fork strategy by when the new commission came in 2019. This for the first time was a vision for the food system that was designed by people from different departments of government, from health, environment, development, agriculture, together, looking at the challenges together. And by virtue of changing that process and changing who holds the pen, you change the content of the policies and you make it less likely for there to be this kind of governance capture, or for the typical interests who control those processes to benefit. So I think that is a way to overcome corruption and capture. It's also, I think, the way to manage the trade-offs is to have those different government departments who are legitimate actors on food systems to be making those decisions together, and really weighing off the trade-offs fairly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nick. And I think, working on data transparency is a huge contribution to good governance, in there. So systemically working on food systems with that angle of also fostering good governance, rules of the game and so on is key. I have a question here for Ms. Schniegens. We're talking about food system sustainability. What do we know about changing policy and budgets to change the trajectory of our food systems towards greater sustainability? From the EU side, what can you tell us?
So this is quite a broad question that would deserve in itself a whole session or more. But I think Nick already touched upon this a bit. So when laying out the Green Deal priorities, and in consequence, strategies and policies, we moved from a consensus that was established within the member states to the allocation of funding. So if you see the funding that is allocated to agriculture, to greening agriculture under the common agricultural policy, that also, for example, we track biodiversity funding, climate funding in the CAP. And this is all translated in other instruments, whether it's on research or structural funds for regional development. So I think that the message is, once you have a vision, yes, you can translate that, and it is translated into the policies and subsequently the funding. So this is the good news. Of course, the trajectory is not just an easy one, because you do have in the agri-food system a range of sectors that traditionally have not come together. For example, you need instruments that tackle at the same time farming as much as the retail sector, the consumption, the processing. So in that kind of policy, you just don't implement overnight. So the challenge is really how to articulate our various instruments that we have to best effect, to collectively move towards more sustainability across all the agri-food value chain.
Thank you very much. There have been many questions directed to Maria Fernanda. I will retain only one, which is about the specific role of universities that they can play, and you come from a university. What is really, can research-based knowledge add in this move towards the transformation of agri-food systems? And after that, we'll be closing because our interpreters are leaving. So please, go ahead.
Gracias por la pregunta. Creo que Vivian mencionó un poco el rol que tiene la academia y las ciencias. Básicamente, Colombia en este momento también... Yeah. So thank you very much for the question. So I think that universities and academy plays a crucial role, because it's interesting because we need to consolidate the information about science. So I think that the academy is important in this topic, because we try to bring together different actors. So this is an important thing, because these actors can discuss about the science, about the policy dialogues. And I think that academic can summarize this, so maybe in one specific papers or another kind of methods for divulgation. But I think that it's important that this academy enters on this discussion. But I think that we need more investment on these policies, because we need more funds to try to consolidate these initiatives.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just before concluding, I think that we all agree that establishing a robust and accessible foundation of data and analysis is essential to identify, policy options. And that involves government, civil society, farmers, private sector, the whole range of stakeholders. And this has to be complemented by a political economy approach that includes, these dialogues between the sectors, between the stakeholders, to cultivate the, political will and ownership required for the implementation of such policies and investments. I think that, investments, whether public or private, have to be evidence-based. For us as FAO, we look at our work as a de-risking mechanism for investments, okay? Data, analysis, good knowledge, good expertise is the first port of de-risking of any investments. And of course, we need the capacities and the tools to do that, especially in the context of our developing countries. As we bring this event to a close, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to all the participants and, for your active engagement, insights, contributions, and the wealth of knowledge shared even at this early hour of this day. We are very enthusiastic about the ongoing journey and learning and sharing innovative developments as we collectively work towards this path of more sustainable and equitable agri-food systems. Thank you to all our interveners, panelists here, and please give them a round of applause. Thank you.